It is 9:37, and Charlie Brennan, Debbie Monterey, Voice of St. Louis, KMOX. We've been talking about slot machines and whether it would be a good idea for Illinois to allow Fairmount Park to put slot machines in the racetrack. Would it save it? But we also thought it'd be a good idea to have Ned Presnall in studio with us. He's a licensed clinical social worker and executive director of Clayton Behavioral Addiction Medicine Center, because March is Problem Gambling or Gambling Addiction Awareness Month. And for the vast majority of people who enjoy going to the casinos or playing some slot machines, I'm sure it's just fine, but there are definitely people with a problem, Ned. And I guess the first question is, how do you know when you have a problem?
You know, probably the best analogy is alcohol. A lot of people drink recreationally, but then some people wake up the next day and say, oh my gosh, I drank too much, more than I intended. There's been consequences for drinking, and the same thing happens with gambling. People wake up the next day and realize that they spent a lot more than they intended to, and it starts to cause financial and relational and emotional problems.
Yeah, I can imagine it's a real marriage killer.
It's a real marriage killer. It's a real financial killer, and financial stress is one of the major stressors for a relationship.
Now, having done a lot of research in the past on gambling problems, I had uncovered in another state, and I'm sure it probably would mirror Missouri, but when gambling came to this other state, there was a big rise in the number of people who began embezzling from their companies to fund their gambling addictions, and a big rise in the number of people who were making false reports to the police because they would actually take their paychecks, spend it all at the casino, lose it, and then not want to go home and tell the spouse, oh, I gambled away all of our money for the next 2 weeks. So I guess if you do that, you know you've got an issue.
Yeah, secrecy is a big part of a gambling problem. If you start hiding your losses from the people that you love, that's a real sign of a problem.
So does a winning day at the slots or at the horse track kind of like massage the pleasure center of the brain or something like that?
Certainly winning does, but the real problem is that the perception of the opportunity to win is what people gravitate towards who have gambling problems. And so even though losses are piling up, there's always that perception, I might be able to win next time. And it's true. On some level, there's the possibility of winning. But the person's brain doesn't process that possibility accurately. And so people chase winnings that aren't really there.
When we talk about somebody, say, quitting smoking, I think in some ways it might be easier to quit smoking because you don't have to smoke, and fewer people do. But it seems like every time we turn around in our society, somebody's coming up with a new proposal to, put slot machines here or add another casino or buy a lottery ticket. And it's everywhere. So when you're treating somebody with a gambling problem, how do they kind of get through daily life without it bombarding them?
Yeah, addiction is big business. There was just a quote in the newspaper the other day about the CEO of HBO saying, we're in the business of creating addicts. We want to sell products. He had that, he actually said that sentence. And so, yes, if you have an addiction, chances are people are marketing to your addiction. And so when relapse prevention is all about using your intelligence to really create barriers between yourself and that addictive substance or behavior.
Well, if you listen to the commercials and you talk to people generally, you hear about people who played their number or did whatever and were successful. Have you seen any hard luck cases here in the St. Louis area?
Hard luck cases in which people lost a lot. I'm sorry, repeat the question.
In other words, gambling ruined lives in our area.
Oh, absolutely. I've seen people go to real ruin because they just keep chasing their losses.
Like, how bad does it get?
It gets so bad that, there was actually a article in the St. Louis Post-Dispatch about someone who had 3 mortgages on their home. People really put the things that are most important to them on the table to gamble when they have a real problem.
Are these successful people, or are these people who never really made it, or just
all walks of life? All
really?
Walks of life. People.
A guy's got a lot of money. He's going to, spend it in gambling?
Yeah, and in fact, sometimes people who have a lot of money have that buffer, and so they think that they can gamble and gamble and gamble and gamble, and it's never going to catch up to them. And then they're the ones that end up losing so much and finding that they're in too deep.
So if somebody has a gambling addiction or a gambling problem, do they generally have, I guess, what we'd call an addictive personality, that they might be addicted to something else, or is it kind of gambling specific?
Addictive personality is a little bit contentious because it's not really a diagnosis, and we're not sure exactly how all of that cross addiction works. However, yes, it is the rule rather than the exception that someone with a gambling problem probably has other addictions. So, for instance, I was reading one study that showed that among people with problem gambling, 70% also met criteria for an alcohol use disorder. And that's not uncommon to think about, right? People go to the casino, they also drink. They're probably drinking more than they intend to. They're also gambling more than they intend to. And there's a real synergy between those problems.
We've got a guy on the line right now who apparently has banned himself from casinos. You want to put on those headsets there, Ned? By the way, our guest, ladies and gentlemen, during this National Gambling Awareness Month is Ned Presnall. He's a licensed clinical social worker and executive director of Clayton Behavioral Addiction Medicine Center, also an adjunct professor at WashU's Brown School. Hello, Mike. You're on KMOX.
Hi, how you doing?
Good.
Good.
Well,
hey, listen, I don't want to make light of this. I did ban myself a couple of years ago from one of the casinos, specifically the One-Armed Bandits. And I did win. I got a royal flush one time, and as odd as this might sound, I could see myself losing all that money, and I lost about 3/4 of it, and that's when I went into the office and got some really, really odd looks from the people as I was filling out the paperwork, but I could see myself going down that road. Now, have I snuck in the gambling casino since the last 2 years? Absolutely, because there's that other kind of getting away with something sort of thrill. And, you know, how bad can casino jail be anyway? But I do it less, and I don't lose much money. And I'm one of those borderline, almost addictive type personalities. Almost could be a big drinker. I could almost be a smoker.
what do you do for a living, Mike?
Right now I'm a janitor.
How much do you usually bet?
Boy, I've lost all the way up to like $70-$80. Usually 40-50. And over the course of a year, this past year, maybe 200 or 300. Mm-hmm. But my point is, I'm really close to wanting that bigger bite or taste of, and being close to having that full-blown addiction. I'm not there. And I don't know if your guest understands that perception.
Well, let's find out. Ned, what do you think?
Well, actually, I like that Mike brought up this idea that addictive problems are a spectrum. You know, he finds himself in one, he calls it a borderline spot, where he's trying to control his gambling behavior, but he's also subverting the barriers he put between himself and gambling. And I think there are a lot more people in the United States and in Missouri that find themselves in that sort of borderline place where they know they kind of have a problem and they're trying to control it. And maybe that's okay. You know, maybe they are never going to need treatment. But someone like Mike could easily start losing more, and then they might require more intensive help.
Now, is it the going into a casino and the bells and the whistles and the excitement and the winning that causes that addiction? Because we have so much internet gambling. It's so easy to like just sit in your home and gamble if you really wanted to, right?
Yeah, worldwide, internet gambling has tripled in revenues in the past 5 years. So this is a type of gambling that's really taking off. And unfortunately, it's also very, very popular among people that use computers most, young people. And so young people, even people that can't legally gamble, can sit in their rooms. They can also use substances, which, you know, impairs their ability to make good judgments. They can play multiple games at one time. Sometimes it's much less regulated than land-based gambling. And so sometimes you can use credit cards and max out your credit card in order to gamble, which you really can't do at a land-based casino. So there's a lot of problems with internet gambling, and we expect that just to continue to be a problem, as all internet addictions have been.
John is joining us on the line right now. Hi, John.
Good morning, Debbie. Hello.
Hi,
Hello.
Go ahead.
I just wanted to say I think Ned's right on the mark there where he said, you know, if the worst thing can happen is early on if you win big. I used to go up on the Alton Bell all the time, and they'd take cruises up the river and have a good time, and I won $2,300, and I thought, wow, I got a $1,000 a week job. I could just quit that, come up here 1 or 2 days a week, float around, be my own boss. It'd be good, see all these good-looking girls, but I didn't know about all the cigarette smoke and bar food. And I saw a movie once with Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner, and she asked him if he was into birds, and he said, no, was into shortcuts, and I realized that's what I was doing.
Mm-hmm.
So I stopped. I go now. Sometimes if I go, I might win $50. Sometimes I might lose $40. Even if I lose $40, $60, $80 now, I'm upset because that's a leather jacket or something I could have had for the next 10 years. So they do have problems, and I can understand where people that are close to the edge are a little weak.
All right. Thanks a lot, John. What do you say to that, Ned?
Yes, if you win big, then that gets stored in your memory, and you remember the excitement. You remember how relieving it is to have a big pool of money that you don't have to work for every week. And that can become part of the process of problem gambling. Memory is a big part of addiction. No, there's nobody out there on the street who's never tried cocaine who's craving cocaine. And there's nobody who's out there on the street who's never won or gambled that's craving a big gain through gambling. So that memory and experience is part of the problem.
It gives you that illusion that I'm really good at this.
Yes, I'm really good at this, and it can happen again. And that what happens then is the risk reward ratio. You stop processing it well, and so you say, oh yeah, I can quit my job and I can just come up here a couple days a week. Well, if you look at any of the numbers, that's not going to happen. You're going to lose over time. All
right, Bob, is there a gambling problem in your household?
Yes, I had to help my in-laws with a bankruptcy file because they just gambled way too much. My mother-in-law had a theory that if you gambled the max, you obviously could win the max. So the money she put in went pretty quick. They had a paid-off house. They ended up with 2 mortgages, maxed out credit cards. They would get a credit card to pay a previous credit card off. When we started the process, they had 23 credit cards.
Whoa.
Several of which were maxed out. So it's a pretty serious problem.
Now, do they have to stay out of the casinos now? Is it under control?
No, they refused. Well, since my father-in-law's passed, but my mother-in-law refused to put in the paperwork because she felt if she ever got straight with her money again, then she wouldn't be able to go back to the casinos.
What do you think about this, Ned?
That is one of the hallmarks of addiction as well, is this idea that someday I'll be able to do again and it will be different this time.
Yeah.
Even though I've lost so much in the past, the problem drinker says, I'm going to be able to control it this time. This time it won't have negative consequences. And it can be really hard to get over that hump and to really achieve long-term recovery. And that perception that it can be different next time is what propels a lot of relapse.
Got about a minute to go. Don, can you be brief?
Yeah, Charlie, I am in agreement with your guess. I had severe trouble with gambling, and it's bad, it's dangerous, and I've lost a lot of money, and it was in 2008. I took my name, put it on the no gambling list. I have to say, Charlie, it put me in bankruptcy.
The gambling did?
Yes, sir, it did.
Yeah.
Yeah, two bankruptcy stories in a row, so I guess it's pretty common.
Yeah, I think that's probably a good place to, end is to focus on that, addiction is not primarily an issue of pleasure, it's an issue of suffering. People with addictions of all types experience extreme suffering, and that the pleasure is what they're chasing, that reward, that excitement, but it's really a small fraction of what they feel when they have the problem.
Now, we know people can contact you at Clayton Behavioral Addiction Medicine Center, but isn't there like a hotline, or what would you recommend for people listening who do want to get that first
Well, there's
step?
a well-advertised hotline in Missouri, 888-BETS-OFF, and they can call there and try to get referrals. But I also think the best referral source for all addiction treatment in St. Louis is the NCADA St. Louis, National Council on Alcohol and Drug Abuse. They're the most active referring organization. And I encourage people to call there as well.
Very well. Ned Presnall, thanks a lot for joining us today on KMOX.
Thanks for having me.